Hello and welcome back to the Championship Crowd podcast and to our special edition ahead of the playoff semi-final first legs happening this Monday. We'll be hearing from the fans later on in the podcast as we look ahead to those games. But first of all, let's come to the one and only Adam Harvey. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Yeah, obviously looking forward to the playoffs ahead. Quite glad Norwich aren't in them. I like a playoff kind of fixtures when your team's not involved. It's obviously fun to see who goes up and who doesn't. But nah, not so nice when you're the team involved.
Oh, well, I'm a different part. I love it. I love the playoffs. It's exciting. Obviously, I'll probably end up hating the playoffs after this season, but we'll see. You never know. I might love them even more. But what don't you think, as a fan, Adam, as a Norwich season ticket holder, you would have been thinking I might have been able to go back into the stadium to watch these playoffs and then maybe even into Wembley?
Nah, I think I'm going to sit more comfortable on the fact that I'll be going to Stamford Bridge and the Emirates and Old Trafford and all of those sort of historic grounds next season already with a championship trophy in the back of the car. I think that'll suit me better than a trip to Wembley to play whoever it may have been.
So what, you just didn't back Norwich in the playoffs? You don't think you'd be able to progress through the playoffs?
I mean, we technically the last playoff campaign we won at Wembley against Middlesbrough there, and Norwich are okay in the playoffs. To be fair, we've had a few bad campaigns. The one 2002 where we lost to Birmingham at the Millennium Stadium was not brilliant, but we've had some successful times in the playoffs. We're not really a playoff team. We've always been a champions or automatic promotion team, and that's kind of been the way it's been again this season.
Yeah, you are. You like getting those top two, but I'm looking forward to maybe watching Swansea get promoted in a stadium, which you wouldn't be able to experience when your kids come back in years to come, whenever you decide. And then they ask you, Adam, what was the promotion season like in 2021? You would just be saying, I was watching it from home. You won't be able to tell them, I went to Wembley, saw my team get promoted. Bring the memories. That's what I'm looking forward to. Hopefully we can do it. We shall see. But moving on slightly, Derby. We were discussing the amazing final day in our last podcast on the usual coming out on Monday. And we're talking about that great final day. But a few things have happened since. We said we wouldn't go into the debate in terms of whether Derby should get points deducted because we kind of already talked about that previously. So we didn't mention it in that last podcast. And as we were discussing, probably the next hour or so, the news came out that the appeal from the EFL has actually been successful and that Derby have breached these financial fair play rules. Questions got to be asked why it wasn't seen a year ago and why the EFL had to appeal this decision. But your thoughts in terms of the punishment?
I think it's one of them that's a bit difficult to put on this season. Obviously, we've seen it in the past. Obviously, Wigan had that points deduction last season, but that came into force before the season ended. I think that would have probably had to have been the situation with Derby. I think it would be incredibly harsh and probably go against the grain of football if this deduction got put in place now. Obviously, for Wycombe's sake, they're going to be arguing to the high hills that this needs to be put in place this season so they can survive. But I think more than likely you'll see a financial punishment this summer, and then I think a points deduction potentially at the start of next season, obviously depending on whether they deem it, a sort of real big breach in financial fair play or sort of just a minor one.
Yeah, I think it's got to be a points deduction, but sadly, I think it will be next year. I think just for the integrity of the championship to relegate someone after the final day. I think Sheffield Wednesday, theirs actually got carried on to obviously this season. But you got to think, I think it was Birmingham who helped the EFL out before and gave them their books and just said we have breached the financial fair play, and they helped them in terms of the negotiations of that. They managed to get less points. You look on a Derby's perspective, they were checked. The EFL thought the check-in was wrong, so they've appealed a decision. It's been over a year it's happened. In that time, Derby has seen themselves in the relegation zone, bottom of the league for most of the season. Then they're out of the relegation zone, but never had that buffer of 10 points or 12 points or so. they never went to the EFL and said, yeah, we have actually breached it, or that we are worthy. You've appealed this decision, so really we're going to help you out to try and lessen the blow, but also just for the integrity of football. But they haven't done that. So in some ways, why not just give them the points deducted this year? They could have easily helped the thing. They're very lucky that somehow the financial fair play people didn't think they breached it. And now, because the EFL have appealed it and have seen they're in the wrong, it's a weird one. And I think if I'm a Wycombe fan, I'll be very annoyed with it. I think what they've done is quite incredible, but also you've got to feel Derby, they lost, I think, only 1-1 in their last 15 games. Would that have happened had they been knowing they had to fight for it a bit more? I think those first few games in that bad spell was when they, after I think joined the Nottingham Forest at Nottingham Derby, and then they went on a few good results. And I think we heard from Cameron thinking they will be safe around that time, because you don't naturally think they're going to go on a big spell of losing games. But had they had those points deducted, it may have changed it. So it would be harsh. But I also think, again, it might be justifiable. But there you go. That's the financial fair play out of the window. We're discussing, hopefully it wasn't going to come to Wembley in terms of the playoffs the other day. Looking likely on Thursday, time of recording, 11 o'clock in the morning, that it's going to Porto. That is probably 90% sure. That's good news, isn't it?
It's great news, yeah, because the Championship final, has to be played at Wembley. It's where it's always been. It's an iconic moment in the season and football in general, that this big trophy, this massive game in football, it has to be at Wembley. And obviously the fact that we can get fans back, the fans of these clubs who do reach the final would be absolutely gutted if it gets changed to another date or another stadium, or it's always been on that same weekend. So it really is massive for the Championship, and obviously the EFL needs this. Like it is their big game, it is their showcase game. So yeah, it's great news.
Yeah, you say the EFL needs it, but it was a bit annoying, like on Monday or so, that they came out and saying they would be happy to talk to UEFA in terms of the EFL were saying and moving the game. I thought they should have had a bigger stand on it, that this is booked in, this is the Championship. But I guess the powers of authorities, they've just said they were going to be happy. But luckily, it seems like the British government don't want all the different sponsors and all of those different people to come over into Wembley Stadium, and Porto will be likely one. It's a bit annoying because also then I think it means Istanbul gets it, and then Wembley can't then have their previously scheduled 2023 for the 100th year anniversary. I think that's out of the window now, because then they all just get drawn back from the year before. So yeah, that's a bit annoying, but Portugal done lucky out of the coronavirus, 2 Champions League finals in 2 years for them. But yes, I think very good in terms of the fans. The fans will be delighted. So as we look ahead to the first kickoff, Monday, 6 p.m, Bournemouth are home to Brentford. Let's hear from the fans now. 2 fans from Bournemouth and Brentford.
So welcome to the end of season preview for Brentford FC. Obviously, we're in the playoffs, but obviously as a season as a whole, we lost Ollie Watkins and Said Benrahma early on, and we didn't lose that many significant players. They were the 2 main ones, but obviously they were expected to leave after Fulham beat us in the playoff final. But Ivan Toney smashed it this season. 31 goals, 10 assists. He's broken the goals record for the EFL Championship. What a player he's been for us. But obviously, as a season as a whole, it's been an okay season. We had an 21 unbeaten run, and then we had a little bit of a dark patch as we normally go through. And we ended up in the playoffs as expected. We didn't have much trouble getting into that. We won our last few games going into the playoffs on good form. However, it's been an okay season. I think there's definitely questions on around the squad and obviously the mentality. But obviously, we're in the playoffs. We can't complain considering we lost 2 of our best players last season. And, there's been injuries in and around the squad. Obviously, Rico Henry, Henrik Dalsgaard, Pontus Jansson, Christian Norgard being the notable injuries we've had throughout the season. So playoffs, I think, is a good achievement for us this season. In terms of looking ahead to Bournemouth, Bournemouth was actually one of the ones I was trying to avoid, but obviously I was hoping to avoid any of them. But Bournemouth is a good one, in the sense that we beat them twice this season. And obviously, yes, playoff form goes out the window form goes out the window. But when you beat a team twice in a season, it does have the mental effect on you. You know, 2 times. Obviously, the first game we won 2-1. Ivan Toney, I believe, opening the scoring. Then obviously a brilliant move by Bournemouth. Dominic Solanke getting on the goal and equalising. And obviously Tariq Foster getting a key goal. I think his 3rd of the season at that point. Header at the back post. Obviously, more recently we played Bournemouth. It was quite a dominant performance by Brentford. I don't think Bournemouth laid much of a glove on us, but they were coming on a good run. I think they were 6 in a row, or they had a draw after that. But they were on good form coming into it, and obviously we had a very dominant win, 1-0 in the end. It could have been 2 or 3, but it was a very comfortable performance for Brentford. But obviously the playoffs is a different monster. Entirely, it's a different game. The mentality's become different, and obviously it's time for Brentford to show what did they learn from last season. You know, it's going to be a big one. Obviously, the key men for Brentford is obviously going to be Ivan Toney. The man has been on fire. He just broke the record for the EFL Championship goals in a season. Obviously got 10 assists for that. He's going to be key. He's fallen a little bit off it. You know, I think if he had a few guilt-head charges in the past few games, and he could have actually broken the record and some more. So he's going to be obviously key for us. In terms for Bournemouth, there's obviously a few players. Dominic Solanke, obviously Dan Juma, I believe that's how you pronounce the name, has been on fire for Bournemouth recently, and he's been one of the key players, I believe, in their resistance and obviously in their push towards the playoffs and obviously near the autos. So he's going to be key for him. It's obviously going to be a very good battle because we're 2 good footballing sides. Obviously, Woodgate has come in and he's got that team performing well to the best ability. They've gone through a bit of a dark patch. I don't know if that's the new manager bounce over or it's just a bit of, you know, tired legs. You know, all the teams have been playing Tuesday, Saturday, not much training session. And fair play to him, you know, he's coming to a side, not much training sessions, and he's got them absolutely revolutionised. They look like a side that, if they don't go up this season for the players, they could go up next season. So in terms of the first leg, it's going to be away. Obviously, that's going to be one of the first games we'd planned. So the complexion of the match is very different. I think it's important that we don't underestimate the amount that fans can have an impact. Even if it's a 10% full stadium, it's still 25% full stadium is still quite an impact to have. So I think the first leg, I would be happy with a draw. You know, take it, go back to our stadium, bring our fans there, and see what we can do. And obviously, I think overall on the side will be a 1-1 draw in the first leg, and I think will be a 1-0 win in the second leg. So obviously 2-1 over both legs, and obviously the final will be Swansea Barnsley in the next one. I think you just have to beat who comes. Obviously, there's no team you really want in the end because you have to beat them. And you know what, if you want to go up to the Prem, and that's it. So yeah, I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw in the first leg, 1-0 win in the second leg, and hopefully Brentford advance to the final, where hopefully we can better our performance from last season.
Hi there, Kirk here from Cherishwood Army YouTube channel. So what can I say about AFC Bournemouth season back in the Championship? Well, hit the ground running, picked up points and was scoring goals comfortably. Turned Christmas though into January, and that would become a lot harder for us. We would drop points and lose matches we probably shouldn't have lost. Jason Tinder would also lose his job. Jonathan Woodgate would replace him and get the gig until the end of the season. He would get a reaction from the team. We did pick up wins against Watford and Norwich, and we did win 7 matches in a row. Once those playoff positions was confirmed though, we would lose the last 3 games of the season and lose them without scoring a goal. So Brentford, it is in the playoffs. Brentford, a team we haven't beaten this season so far. However, we got a goalkeeper in Asmir Begovic, 15 clean sheets, arguably AFC Bournemouth's player of the season. Carter Vickers came in 2021, broke himself into the team and has been solid at the back. Lerma and Pearson, 2 players who give us that bite but can also link up the play between the defence and the attack. And then Philip Billing, a player that's added stats to his game, his best return in a season in his whole career. And when Philip Billing scores, AFC Bournemouth win. And a connection that Philip Billing has is with Arno Danjuma, one of our best players this season, wins a game out of nowhere. He just needs the right moment in the right areas and he will hurt Brentford. David Brooks, we hope, can turn up on his day, unplayable. Unfortunately, sometimes it's just not consistent enough. And Dom Solanke adding lots of goals this season to help us get into the playoffs. So first leg at home, I am going for a Bournemouth win. I'm going 2-1. We are due a win against Brentford and then I'm hoping we can get a draw away from home to take us on to the final.
There we go. We've heard from both sets of fans there. We've heard about the top scorer in the league, Ivan Toney, being an unbelievable signing for Brentford. What a play, Adam.
Yeah, he's had a brilliant season. We've mentioned him many, many times on this podcast, and he's a player I really, really like. You know, he's got sharp movement. His composure in front of goal is very, very good, and he's got a very good return ratio on goals. I mean, 31 goals this season in the actual championship season, although I'd say 9 of those have been from the penalty spot, which obviously a penalty is still a goal, but for me, it's still important to get goals in open play because you're not guaranteed a penalty in every single game. So that's obviously a factor that I think will come into this playoff game. But obviously, Toney did score a few goals towards the end of the season and sort of recaptured that form that we saw, particularly in the first half of the season. And I think that will carry Brentford well in the playoff games here against Bournemouth.
Yeah, exactly. He went on a little bit of a dry spell, but then he has got those 2 goals in the last 2 games, which would really help him. But also the fact that I think he's got 10 assists this season. That he's not just a goal scorer, but he's also quite influential in helping them create more goals. We've seen Brentford, they've scored a lot of goals this season, and he's been one of the key reasons for it. But it is crucial that they win this playoff and then get promoted to the Premier League, because after only 1 season, you'll probably see him leaving the club if they're not promoted, the same as Ollie Watkins last season. So they'll really be hoping that he can perform in those playoffs, showcase his ability, and lead them to the Premier League. A few key players, though, for Bournemouth. I think Billing, I know if I heard from the Bournemouth fan back then about that before the Swansea game, I think Billing scored in the 9th minute against us. I could have turned it off because he said whenever Billing scores, they win, then lost 3-0. So I think it would have been good to know that before. But Billing, obviously, key player as well. I like David Brooks. He said, obviously, he's had a few injury problems of late, but he is a key player. And I think Bournemouth do have the edge in terms of these better players with big experience in terms of the Premier League and that.
Yeah, I think the player I really highlight from Bournemouth is Dan Juma. I think if I'm going to talk for an individual performance this season against Norwich that I've personally seen, he was the star player in the home game against us, and he actually scored against us in the away fixture back in October, September time as well. And he looks like a real talent. Only 24 years of age, a Dutch player. I think will probably play international level if he hasn't already. 15 goals at championship level, 7 assists as well. And I think that's probably a man who, in a game like this, where you probably want that little bit of magic, which is what Kirk talked about there. I think that's what you're going to be looking to need in this kind of a game. And I think Dan Juma can provide that, particularly when you've got the likes of Brooks and Solanke and the players he's mentioned there, who are all very much in, despite the defeats towards the end of the season, have all had very good seasons at this level. And obviously we've seen it, Brentford on a given day are beatable. Although, as mentioned, literally Brentford now have got 3 straight wins against Bournemouth in all league competitions. So Bournemouth have a point to prove in this game.
Exactly. 3 straight wins, 2 league wins this season. We saw one recently. It was only a few games back. That was the 1-0 win. We saw a red card as well for Brentford, but they managed to win that game. And then the 2-1 win earlier on in the season. Obviously, both only by a 1-goal deficit. But that must give Brentford fans and Brentford players a bit of confidence going into the game. And Bournemouth are going to be racking their brains around how they're going to beat this Brentford side.
Yeah, obviously, I think both games have kind of come at difficult points in the season almost for Bournemouth. Obviously, the December game was one where Bournemouth had that slight dip in form and obviously eventually left Tyndall without a job. And then obviously I feel like this game there at the Vitality Stadium was one where obviously Bournemouth had pretty much secured the playoff position already, likewise had Brentford. And it was just one of them where it's like, it's just playing for positions in the playoff places now. So I don't think you can necessarily read as much into that. Likewise, the 2 straight defeats that Bournemouth suffered after that game. Again, not so sure you can read too much into them. Obviously, the game against Wycombe, they dropped something like 6 or 7 players from their regular starting 11. They'd be more disappointed in the Stoke game in the sense they did start a strong team and suffered a 2-0 defeat. But in some ways, you can say, look, they're saving themselves for these playoff games. Obviously, they know that Brentford are in good form, 12 games unbeaten, 4 straight wins at the end of the season. So this has got, this clash of the Titans almost feel about it, because I think both of these sides will very much feel they should be in that playoff final. And obviously, if fixtures might have gone their way, they could have potentially got arguably easier fixtures on paper. But, they'll both know that a win in this will give them a good chance at Wembley.
Yeah, I do think from a neutral's perspective, the Bournemouth-Brentford game, you do look at that and think that is probably the better game. That's the game people will be tuning in for more, I guess, than the Swansea-Barnsley game. Just because, as you say, they were probably the teams that people would be thinking would be in that playoff final. Incredible that they're now meeting in the semi-final. But I guess Bournemouth have kind of only got themselves to blame for that. We had previously been talking about Bournemouth in podcasts before, saying they're probably going to be going up through the playoffs because they're coming in with, I think it was 7 league wins in a row. But then they did lose against Brentford, as we've discussed before, and lost, as you mentioned, their last 2 games. So it's a bit interesting there. They have had this decline in form. How much of an impact do you think that has on their morale? Or, as you say, they rested their team against Wickham, so it's probably not as bad.
I think it's all set up for a really, really good game here. Obviously, you've got Brentford, who are banging form, have definitely turned it round. Obviously, they are unbeaten in 12. They had that run where it was like seemingly draw after draw after draw, and that was ultimately what led Watford to pull away from them and clinch automatic promotion. And that will be in the back of every single Brentford's player's mind that, they could have realistically got automatic promotion, in my opinion, this season. They have the players on the pitch to be able to do it. Obviously, Bournemouth on paper, I would say, are the favourites. I think they've got the best playing squad. Obviously, dropped out of the Premier League last season, and they'll know that they can make it a hat-trick of teams that got relegated last season that can go straight back up. And, obviously, they did have that really good run, didn't they, where they got those seven straight wins. And a few of them were sort of by, just a 1-goal margin. But on the whole, they had generally picked up quite a lot of form, and it looked like the momentum was going to carry them. Obviously, the last 3, as I kind of mentioned, I feel like the fact they'd already secured a playoff place, the automatics were too far from their reach. Probably did play into it a little bit, and they were trying to rest their better players for this massive game. So I think it's also up for a really good game. And I think actually this might be one that you look at that first leg, and I think it's all set for a draw, in my opinion. Like, it's one of them that I think if I was going to sit on the fence now, I'd say 1-1 in that first game.
Yeah, it could be one of those cagey affairs between the two teams. They're both knowing the capability of the other team. They don't really want to make the first move. But going back to Brentford, I think it was, they had 6 draws in maybe 8 games in that 15-run unbeaten run. But what's been very important for them is, I think, the last 5 games, they've won all 5 of them. So they are coming in knowing that they're back to those form after missing out in the automatics, but it might be playing in their back of their minds. They missed out in the automatics. They've been so close previously last year. They missed out on the last day. Their playoff record, I believe, they've played in 10 different playoffs, and they've never got promoted through the playoffs. Thomas Frank, we mentioned him before, degree in psychology. Is he going to use that to get his players ready, get his players to forget about the previous playoffs and project them to promotion?
I think it's one of them. I think if Brentford can get through the semis, I think he'll be really in a place where we like if we get Swansea or Barnsley, no disrespect to either of those two teams, but realistically on paper, you'd be back in Brentford. They finished quite a few points actually ahead of all the rest of the teams in the playoffs, or 87 points to Swansea in 4th with 80. So they were kind of that team who, in my opinion, have been obviously by far the 3rd best team in the division over the course of the season. So they are ultimately the favourites on paper. So I think his psychology will be, look, let's get through this tricky game against Bournemouth. We probably would have rather avoided that over a 2-game leg. But I think, if one of them, if they get to the final, I think his psychology will be like, let's learn from this last experience last year there against Fulham and really prove like the doubters wrong that we can win a playoff, campaign.
Tricky game against Bournemouth, you say. So 1-1, I think you're going for the first leg. Overall, who do you fancy?
I'm going to swing slightly towards Brentford. I think it's a difficult one to call, and I think it will be a really, really tight game. But I think what's probably quite important is the fact that Brentford had the home tie in the second game, which in my opinion, is always obviously slightly more favourable. I think as long as Brentford come away from the Bournemouth away game with a minimum of a draw, I think I'd favour them at home to seal the deal, especially if they have some fans back in that stadium. And that's been one thing that I think Brentford have probably missed this season. They're one of these teams that obviously rely on the fans. So, yeah, I'm going to swing towards Brentford to secure a playoff final place.
Brentford. Okay, I'm going Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth will win the first leg. I think they could win it quite convincingly somehow. I don't know. I just got a weird feeling. I think 3-1 Bournemouth. I think it could go two ways. It could be either cagey, or it could be Bournemouth. And I just think they lost their last three, but it might actually project them. They need to now come out, really fight for this. They've lost to Brentford twice this season. But I think they're going to write it right today, not today, on Monday. And they're going to perform, really well. I think they'll get a good result on Monday. But as you say, they going into that second leg, it could be another story. But yeah, I think that those fans, the fact that fans will be in there is actually going to help those teams, Bournemouth finishing in 6th and Barnsley in 5th, even though the fans are there obviously for the second leg. I think the fact that it's the first game back with fans and then they're solely only your fans, for Barnsley and for Bournemouth, to hear that, to get the support of their fans, which they haven't experienced for a long time, would probably be a bigger effect than the next leg when they've experienced it the week before, don't you think?
Yeah, I think obviously the fan aspect is huge. It's obviously a massive boost for the playoffs, because I feel like the playoffs, you need the fans. That's what makes a playoff campaign so special, is that emotion you see after a playoff game where, as much as you hate to see it, there's fans that are crying because their team are knocked out in a big final or a semi-final, and you get the teams, the fans that are overjoyed that their team are going up to the Premier League or at least secured a place at Wembley, and you see pitch invasions and all that sort of thing. I'm not necessarily going to say you're going to see that in the COVID restrictions, but obviously that is what makes the playoffs such a special thing at the end of a season, and to get the fans back is massive. It's obviously what football's missed throughout the season, and yeah, I think it's going to make it definitely better than what it would have been. I think it would have been slightly more sort of a bit soulless without them.
It would be soulless without them. So now let's hear from two more fans from that next playoff. It's Barnsley v Swansea, 8:15 on Monday. Let's hear from the fans.
Hi lads, it's Carlo van der Watering from the Barnsley FC Reds Report, at Reds Report _ on Twitter, with a short preview of the semi-final of the Championship playoffs. It's Barnsley versus Swansea on Monday at Oakwell. I think it's easy to look at form and say, well, Swansea won 2-0 at home, 2-0 away, so they'll win again. Because if there's one thing we know about Barnsley, is they'll learn from their mistakes, especially under current head coach Valérien Ismaël. I think the weak defence early on in the season, the errors that we're making have been eradicated. And secondly, I think Valérien Ismaël has learned to set his team up to counter those teams that play the long ball over the defence. Swansea was really the first team that did that to us with great success during this season, and other teams since followed. Barnsley's young guns have nothing to fear. I think it's fair to say that of the two teams that have gone up, so Watford and Norwich, and then Bournemouth, Brentford, Swansea, the aim of those clubs would have been a minimal of the playoffs anyway, if not automatic promotion. That's slightly different for Barnsley. I think the board, the players, the fans, it was always about survival in this league. That's number one. And then to try and compete more rather than surviving on the last day like we did last season. Survive we definitely did. And then we went on that run. And I'm not saying we became unplayable, but the style that Barnsley's got suits the young players that they've got. They've got the youngest squad in the EFL. They've got enormous fitness. And then one of the other secret weapons is, if it's not working or we're unable to score goals, he can change a completely front line of three players. So between Coley Woodrow, Carlton Morris, Daryl Dike, Dominic Freezer, Victor Adebayejo, Connor Chaplin, that's six that he can potentially choose from. And don't forget, goals have been coming from a central defender, Mikael Helik, Callum Stiles. Callum Britton yet to score his first goal, but he's had a few attempts and he's never far off. So there is goals in his Barnsley side. my personal worry is some of the individuals playing in white of Swansea on Monday. Andre Ayew and Conor Horan are match winners. Listen, we know all about Conor Horan, and fantastic player, fantastic person. And I genuinely wish him all the best, but maybe not for those 90 minutes on Monday. Andre Ayew, bags of experience. And I think when the chips are down, and maybe if they go a goal behind, somebody like that can just change a match. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. I think it'll be tight. I don't think any one side will run away with it. But listen, I followed Barnsley for 20 odd years. We've been doing the podcast for about 6 years. I've just got a sneaky feeling that on Monday evening we might be singing We're Halfway There, because I'm going for a Barnsley 2, Swansea 1. And then it's all to play for still, of course, in the second leg the Saturday after. Follow us on Twitter at RedsReport_. And if you're going to watch the match, I hope everybody enjoys it.
Hi, I'm Sammy Wynn, a football business and media student from UCFB Wembley and a lifelong Swansea City fan. I'm so excited to see what the next week or so can bring for the club in the playoffs, starting with Barnsley on Monday, which will be a really, really tight game. I think it being Barnsley's home leg, they're going to have to attack the game in front of their own fans. They're really going to want to get a positive result to bring to the Liberty with them. So we're going to have to be strong defensively. I think Steve Cooper should revert back to a back three, which was so strong for us in the first half of the season. A back three of Mark Gurhey, Ben Cabango and Ryan Bennett will really help the Swans defend against Barnsley's set pieces and their danger men, Callum Stiles and Corley Woodrow. A clean sheet in the first leg is so important. You know, we learnt that in 2011 against Nottingham Forest. If you can get a clean sheet in the first leg, you really give yourself a good opportunity when you come home for the second leg. And obviously a clean sheet means you only have to score one goal, and with Andre Ayew up front, I'd always rely on him to get us that goal. I think Jamal Lowe has also been really good this season, obviously coming in the summer predominantly as a winger. Steve Cooper's played him down the middle for the majority of this season, a little bit out of position, but he's still come up with a good amount of goals. I think Liam Cullen has done brilliantly when he's been called on to play. Obviously coming through our academy, and he'll hopefully be a really top player for us in the future, but I think it would be harsh to not start Jamal Lowe on Monday given his good season. But I think Liam Cullen can definitely have an impact for us off the bench, and that could be really important over the two legs. So for Monday, I'm predicting a 1-0 Swansea win. That would be a really positive result for us to take back to the Liberty with us, and the players should be really excited to play in front of our own fans for the first time in well over a year in our home leg, and a positive result on Monday will be more than welcomed at the Liberty Stadium on Saturday.
Brilliant hearing from those two sets of fans, including the Swansea fans. Indeed, I'm obviously coming from a very biased point of view here. So Adam, mate, the floor is yours. Talk about the game. I think you've got a few interesting head-to-head stats, though. I'd love you to start with.
Yeah, so head-to-head, obviously, Swansea have got the advantage. Obviously, this season, done the double over Barnsley, 2-0 victories, both at Oakwell and at the Liberty. But if we're going on actual history here between these two sides, the last time that Swansea lost to Barnsley was in the playoff final in 2006 in League One. Obviously, Barnsley won that on penalties, so I'm going to slightly somewhat disregard that just because it was 2-2 after extra time. If we're talking last league defeat to Barnsley in a competitive fixture, it's 1983, a 2-0 defeat. So this is obviously quite a long. This is what, nearly 40 years ago since Barnsley last defeated Swansea in an actual just a 90-minute fixture, and they've got to do this in two 90-minute matches in the playoffs. So it's all set for, you know, a very intriguing game here. Obviously, these two sides haven't really met too much at Championship level before. Obviously, both sides have spent long periods of their time in League One and League Two in the past. So it's all set for a really, really good game. Two sides that probably didn't expect to be in the playoffs in all honesty. Like Swansea obviously were in the playoffs last year, but you take away they didn't have Brewster this season, who was such an influential reason why they got there last year. So it's going to be a very intriguing game.
It's going to be a very intriguing game as well. You mentioned that previous meeting in playoffs, even though we've got the much better head-to-head record, Alan Tate on the coaching staff at the moment missed the penalty in a 4-3 penalty win, as well as Akinfenwa missing a penalty for us as well. For Alan Tate on the coaching staff, is it going to be in his back of his mind thinking we need to progress? Obviously, this time out, it's the semi-final rather than the final. And again, even though we're talking about the stadium moving, I was thinking, hopefully it doesn't move back to the Millennium Stadium, even though obviously we're thinking that's in Wales. We lost to Barnsley last time there, so that wouldn't be good. But obviously this is the semi-finals, so it's going to be in the home. It's going to be in Barnsley Stadium, then at the Liberty. Alan Tate, is it going to be in his back of his mind?
I think he'll obviously mention it probably to the players that like this is a big game. Obviously, I think Barnsley and Swansea would be quite happy that they are the two teams that are facing each other. I think both of them will be like this is a more favourable fixture than a Brentford or a Bournemouth. And you get Brentford or Bournemouth in a one game at Wembley. There's no reason why you can't win that game and secure Premier League football next season at Oakwell or the Liberty, whichever side could potentially clinch the promotion. So you've basically got two teams here. You've got Barnsley, who have been immense, particularly the second half of the season, versus Swansea, who were immense in the first half, but in all honesty have dipped a lot in the second half of the year. Defeats against the likes of Preston and Birmingham. They weren't doing that in the first half of the season. So it's all set for an interesting game. I think, Steve Cooper's really got to get into these Swansea players. And I think obviously Barnsley will come at Swansea quick. Obviously they've got the home fixture first, and I saw it. Obviously Norwich played Barnsley there on the last game of the season. Barnsley like playing high tempo pressing football. They've got the forwards there who will score goals. Daryl DK, 9 goals in 19 games. Carlton Morris is another man they've brought in who ultimately scores goals. Likewise, Corley Woodrow. So Alex Mert will be returning as well. He's obviously got in the player of the season. Finishing up in the player of the season places in the championship. So he's going to be another key man for them. But Swansea, I think as long as Swansea don't concede to Barnsley in the first 60 minutes of the away game, I think they'll have enough in the tank probably to pick them off and maybe clinch a late winner to go back to the Liberty.
Yeah, previously 2 clean sheets this season against Barnsley and both 2-0 wins. So they'll be thinking they need to keep that defensive discipline. One of the ways they've had a great defence this season is using that 5 in the back over the 4 in the back. Recently, we've seen Swansea go for a 4 in the back. They even played 4 in the back in their last game. I was thinking, will we go back to 5 in the back to have one game before the playoffs? But it kind of indicates that Steve Cooper is going to stick with the 4 in the back if he's playing that against Watford the other day. I'm hoping we go for the 5. I just think one reason why we can do the 5 is because if it's not working, then we can then just change it into a 4, put Connor Roberts on further up the pitch in terms of on the right wing rather than right wing back. And also it's worked twice against Barnsley. And the reason why we changed it is just because after things Birmingham, apparently we've been found out that their manager came out and it's easy to predict Swansea, but the other teams couldn't. Barnsley couldn't predict us after losing to us previously in the season. They were both quite close games, I think December and January. It worked for most of the season, and we were still creating actually a fair amount of not many chances, but if you compare us to the 4 and when we're playing 4-3-3, we're hardly creating any chances now. And I just don't think it's even made us even more attacking. I think we're still able to get higher up the pitch. I like how high. Well, even Bidwell, Manning plays as well as Roberts on those right wing backs. So, yeah, it's an interesting debate in terms of Swansea fans. Some people want it in the 4. I just think we've got to go for the 5. We've won 2-0 with that, both games in the season. But it'll be interesting to see what Steve Cooper decides there. Adam, mate, scoreline. You're doing this with a Swansea fan co-host. So remember what I want to be hearing, but I think I'm going to have to sit back and not give a score just because I'll be biased. It's over to you to give the fans, give the listeners the opinion and the insight into this game.
Obviously, I've already spoken about Barnsley's sort of woeful record against Swansea. But what I'd say about this season is I think you can almost not disregard, but I think you can probably swift over or basically brush over the fact that these games were played around about the December-January period, which is when Swansea were still very much in form. Barnsley had only then started to turn. Ismail was starting to implement what he wanted to do there, and that's when he started to turn it. I think if you'd have played this game in around about the March-April period, I think this would have been a very different fixture. I think Barnsley are more potent up front now. They've got DK, so this is all set for a very interesting game. I think Barnsley will win the first leg. I think they'll nick it probably 1-0. I think it'll be a scrappy game where you see two sides that are probably, gunning for to try and get the lead going into the Liberty. And I think Swansea will win the reverse leg 1-0, which would set it up for an extra time and potential penalty shootout clash. I think it'll go to penalties. I really do. I think these sides are very matched. I think you've got Barnsley who love to play high tempo football. They've got strikers who will score, but they're a little bit lackluster in the defensive areas at times, versus Swansea, who are generally quite solid at the back and probably not quite as potent up front as what Barnsley are. So I'm going for a penalty shootout, and I think Barnsley will nick it in the penalty shootout at the Liberty Stadium.
Penalty shootout. Oh my word, Adam, mate, what are you doing to me? Hopefully, I don't think I can bear that. Even though I'm excited for the playoffs and many people are quite fearful of it, that would be scary. And you mentioned 1-0 both legs, but away goals, if it was maybe 2-1 and then 1-0, they don't count in the Championship playoffs, do they? So penalties is definitely up there, and it could easily happen. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one to see if it does come to penalties. I think the first leg's going to, I know I said I won't give my opinion, but I will. I think the first leg will be cagey. I think on Monday night, I think it's going to be a 0-0 affair. We don't really create much. And yeah, I just think I think it'll be a 0-0. I can't see many goals in that. And then it'll just be over at the Liberty. Hopefully the 3,000 with tickets will definitely be singing their hearts out and just getting behind the squad, which I say hopefully, I know they will, because we're obviously the best fan base in the whole entire world. So we'll be there singing us along. I think Barnsley have a few more fans because their stadium's a bit bigger, so by the 10% capacity, they're allowed a bit more. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. But who knows? Fingers crossed. It's going to be an exciting set of games. So reminder, Monday, 6 p.m, Bournemouth at home to Brentford. Then 8:15 is the big one. Barnsley versus Swansea. Oh, it's going to be an exciting few legs. We'll be covering those games, recapping on the Monday games, and then looking forward to the games coming up on Saturday, some point next week. So keep updated with us on social media and Twitter. See when our next podcast coming out. Probably Thursday, Adam.
Yeah, I think obviously we'll be recording on the Tuesday or the Wednesday after the first fixtures, ahead of the Saturday fixtures, aren't they, for the second leg?
Exactly. We might play it by ear depending on how happy I am or how disappointed I am after the first leg. But yeah, keep updated, guys. Thanks for listening in, and thank you very much to the fans that took part and gave their point of views of ahead of the big clashes. Really good luck to everyone, except from the Barnsley fans. See you next week.